Well, he has, although Biden, hasn't relaxed any of the measures that Trump put in place. But when the Chinese look at Trump, they see a man who can be relied upon to destroy American influence around the world. What the Chinese are afraid of are close relationships between the US and its allies, so the European Union or the allies in the neighborhood. If you get Trump back, he managed to offend and upset everybody in his first term. And he presented the United States for the first time in 50 years as a highly unreliable ally. So he was trying to charge South Korea, for example, for hosting U.S. troops. He tried to destroy NATO. Well, imagine where we'd be in Russia and Ukraine if he had succeeded in destroying NATO. So that's what the Chinese look at. They look at what is going to weaken America fastest, and it is most certainly Donald Trump in a second term.
This extraordinary story, Isabel. Should we start, as it were, at the beginning of this? The red flag that was raised when it was found out by researchers at Microsoft and academics and others that China were operating to spread lies about American involvement in the Maui fires.
Yeah, it's pretty dismal, as one of the people quoted in that article said, to take advantage of an awful humanitarian disaster for misinformation. But that does appear seems to be pretty. The evidence is pretty good that this is a Chinese operation. It wouldn't be the first time. It is a standard part of China's kit. But I think this one is particularly in bad taste, to be honest.
And those behind this, as you say, pretty confidently thought to be working on China's instruction from China. It's such an implausible account to try to spread about the use of an American weather weapon to cause fires in Maui for the purpose of testing that weapon. They weren't deterred by the implausibility of that.
No, they weren't. It does. If you're going to tell an outrageous lie, tell a really outrageous lie. But you do remember when the COVID epidemic started that this was attributed by the same methods to American germ warfare, and they took it had some traction, that one. It would pop up on far right American websites too, that America had a kind of germ warfare program going on in China and indeed in Ukraine. And these things take a certain they're kind of familiar. They pop up in all sorts of places. So outrageous lies, as Goebbels said, if you repeat them often enough, they become truth.
Yeah, and some people will actually believe them. And in this case,
an awful lot will believe them, yeah.
An awful lot of people will believe them. And in this case, of course, as more by way of a red flag, photos were pumped out there using AI, which again is a warning for the future. It's the first time that sort of thing has been done in quite this way, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is. But there is a lot of concern around misinformation, disinformation, and AI, because one of the things that AI allows you to do, and remember, we're talking about social media networks here, but AI will allow you to experiment in real time with what works best. So it's going to make this kind of thing even more effective, because they'll be able to refine the technique all the time. They'll be able to identify what makes something plausible for certain categories of people. They'll be able to target them very precisely. And so, this is the beginning. We're at the foothills of really quite a serious campaign here.
And an ambitious one. This material has been pushed out there in many, many languages, including quite small communities around the world. And it's a departure for China. They're branching out, as it were. In the past, as you know better than me, they've been using this sort of technique to spread their own accounts of such things as their policy on Taiwan. And now they're reaching way beyond that.
They are reaching way beyond that. And they're reaching into language groups, as you say. Again, something that the AI allows you to do. Although it also makes mistakes, which means that if you're smart, you can spot these things. But a lot of people are not smart. So it allows them to reach all kinds of language groups, including in the developing world. And China's setting itself out as the kind of leader of the developing world and wants to set the narrative. And that involves, of course, attacking the United States and Western liberal democracies and pushing China's story, China's misinformation, China's propaganda, and it does have an effect. Now you mentioned Taiwan, and actually, yes, China's been pushing stories about Taiwan, but we shouldn't forget that it also pushes this sort of stuff to Taiwan, and we've got elections coming up in January, and the PLA, has produced a paper on how important information warfare is in the full spectrum of measures against Taiwan. So that's another place that we're looking for it right now.
And it's judged that this is maybe part of a build up, a run up to the US general election, maybe with the idea of offering some kind of support to Donald Trump. Although Donald Trump, of course, has been pretty aggressive in his position towards China.
Well, he has, although Biden, hasn't relaxed any of the measures that Trump put in place. But when the Chinese look at Trump, they see a man who can be relied upon to destroy American influence around the world. What the Chinese are afraid of are close relationships between the US and its allies, so the European Union or the allies in the neighborhood. If you get Trump back, he managed to offend and upset everybody in his first term. And he presented the United States for the first time in 50 years as a highly unreliable ally. So he was trying to charge South Korea, for example, for hosting U.S. troops. He tried to destroy NATO. Well, imagine where we'd be in Russia and Ukraine if he had succeeded in destroying NATO. So that's what the Chinese look at. They look at what is going to weaken America fastest, and it is most certainly Donald Trump in a second term.
Now, there's no hard evidence, is there, of any collusion between China and Russia on this, although they do seem to be meshing their efforts.
Yes, and they're echoing each other's narratives, and they have been clearly echoing each other's narratives ever since the invasion of Ukraine, actually. So there may not be kind of chapter and verse on this one, but we have seen increasing military contacts, the mutual visits between Moscow and Beijing, joint military exercises, and exchanges of intelligence going on. So this is absolutely par for the course. And China has very much learned from Russia about misinformation and disinformation, and has taken a lot of the lessons that Putin honed in his career as a KGB officer and all the black ops that Russia still practices. China has very much learned from that and has more resources to devote to it. So, it's going to be a bigger problem, I think.
So the idea of a fake news, disinformation attack on the attempt to seriously interfere in the American election next year, that's a worry for America, but also for the democratic world. It wouldn't stop at America. What on earth is the answer to this?
Well, it's very difficult. I mean, the problem is that we don't control social media. The social media companies, the platforms could change their algorithms. That would help. They could be far more vigorous in identifying things like this and taking them down, not waiting for external parties to identify them and complain about them. So it may be that the government, the U.S. government, has to get a bit tougher with the platforms and say, look, this is mandated. This is going to be part of your regulation. You better be doing it rather more vigorously. Otherwise, it's just an open field, and then I think we are really in trouble because there are destroying faith in information and destroying trust in governments is extremely useful if you're an authoritarian adversary, and we can see this happening. We can see the effects of it happening, and but I think it's high time we defended ourselves a little more robustly.
Well, America better look out. The democratic world, Europe better look out. Look out too. Isabel, really good to talk to you. Thank you.
Great to talk to you. Thank you.